Yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania for a question without losing my right to the floor.
Well, I want to thank the senator from Connecticut who's taken the floor today to take a stand for those who lost their lives in Orlando and so many other places. And I know he has lived through that horror, representing folks in Connecticut who went through the horror of 2012. I have a question about why we haven't taken action. I wanted to set forth a predicate first. The numbers here are just startling when you consider, in the context of just the last couple of days, 49 dead, and so many others grievously, and I hope not permanently injured, and all the devastation that means. But here's another number that we probably don't talk about enough. It's a much larger number. It's a number about 33,000. 33,000 Americans lose their lives to gun violence every year. That's hard to comprehend. We've lost numbers like that in wars that go over multiple years. So 33,000 is the number. We have to ask ourselves, why in the face of that, whether it's Orlando, or Newtown, or Aurora, or Tucson, and go down the list of mass shootings. By the way, mass shootings were not part of American life when I was growing up in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. This is a rather new phenomenon, very recent vintage. But when a tragedy and a crime happens like this, and the scale of it is so immense, we have to ask ourselves, is there something we can do? Now, the answer by a lot of Democrats has been, yes, we can do a number of things. We can say finally that military-style weapons, that we can ban those so that we don't have them on our streets. We could take action instead of just debating and expressing solidarity and sympathy and mourning. In addition to doing that, that's appropriate. But in addition to that, we can take action. So we can take action on a military-style weapon. We can take action limiting the clips, the amount of bullets that one person can fire at any one time. I'm convinced for example, based upon the evidence that we saw in Newtown, Sandy Hook Elementary School, the senator from Connecticut talked about, the most horrific way those children died. I'm convinced, based upon the evidence, that the killer, if he had more time, would have killed hundreds of children. And that number would have gone far above the horrific number of 20. So we can take action on that and make sure that at least maybe that criminal, maybe that killer, won't have a military-style weapon, won't have an unlimited supply of ammunition. We can also take action on background checks. We tried that. We got the most votes of any of the 3 votes we took in 2013, but we should certainly vote on that again and take action. That's a third way of taking action. We've had bipartisan consensus on that, but not enough, frankly, not enough Republican votes to pass background checks, which 90% of the American people support. Hard to comprehend why 90% support it and not enough members of the United States Senate. We can also take action on mental health reforms. That too has been bipartisan, but that hasn't happened, but that's another way to take action. What I'm trying to do is to focus on the other aspect, or at least the additional aspect of this tragedy in Orlando, which is, as the president said, as I said, and a lot of people said, this was an act of terrorism, but it was also an act of hate. And unless we begin to do something about the problem of hate in America which infuses the horrific actions that killers take, unless we take action against that in some fashion, we're not going to solve this problem. So one of the things we could do, and again, we've got to do a long list of things to deal with gun violence, to reduce that number of 33,000 Americans dying every year because we refuse, the Congress of the United States refuses to take any action at all. But here's what my bill would do. very simple. It would say if you are convicted of a misdemeanor hate crime, and you would, in order to meet the requirements of this law, it's a two-part test. It would have to be a misdemeanor hate crime that fit this two-part test. Number one, it would have to be either an act of violence that was part of the conviction, or an attempt to use violence, or thirdly, that there was an action directed at either the attempt, the use, or the actual use of force or violence. Second, in addition to that, the crime would have to be, and the conviction would have to be, a hate crime motivated by hate or bias against 8 groups of Americans in what we call in the law protected classes. First of all, if someone committed a hate crime against someone because of their race, and that is on the rise, we're told by the experts that there are over 890, the number they put is 892, 892 hate groups in the United States of America. Over 190 of them are Ku Klux Klan. All of that is part of this problem. The rise of hate crimes, the rise of hate groups directing violence in other actions against African Americans, that's on the rise. Hate groups that are targeting Muslims, that's on the rise. Hate groups that are targeting individuals with disabilities, that's on the rise. And of course, as we saw so horrifically in Orlando, hate crimes, and in this case, 49 people killed because of animosity against LGBT Americans. So if you're going to be engaged in hateful actions that rise to the level of the definition of this bill, and you're directing that at someone because of their race, their color, their religion, their national origin, their gender, their sexual orientation, and their gender identity or disability. So if you are directing hateful actions against those Americans in those classes, that would meet the definition of a misdemeanor hate crime. And the consequence of that, the consequence of conviction, or the consequence of a sentence enhancement because of a hate crime, would be you'd be denied a firearm. And that's one way, just one of many ways that we can make sure that someone's hate is checked at a much lower level. I don't want to wait till that hate manifests itself in a felony conviction, okay, where there's a much graver crime that's been perpetrated because of hate, because you're directing your hate through violence against individuals because of their race, or because of whom they love, or because of for some other reason. So this is one of several ways that I think we can act. The list gets longer. Obviously, we're at a point now where we might be able to vote, I hope, on finally taking action on the terrorist watch list. Why is it that if you're too dangerous to be on an airplane, you're not too dangerous to have a weapon, or to have a high-powered weapon, a military-style weapon with unlimited ammunition to shoot at anyone you want? So there are a lot of things we can do, and that's why I posed the question to the senator from Connecticut about what is it that we can do and what is it that we should do. I wanted to make a point as well before I pose the exact question. We know that in Orlando, 3 of the victims were from Philadelphia, my home state. They were in that nightclub in Orlando when the gunman opened fire. 18-year-old Akira Murray's family took her and 2 friends. Patience Carter was one of the 2, and Tiara Parker. They were on vacation in Orlando from Philadelphia to celebrate Akira Murray's graduation from West Catholic High School. The presiding officer, my colleague from Pennsylvania, knows where that high school is as I do. She had a full basketball scholarship to Mercyhurst College, way at the other end of our state, up in northwestern Pennsylvania. She was 3rd in her class. She just happened to be in Orlando and happened to be in that club when her life was ended. They were there that night to dance and to laugh. She was 18 years old and not even a resident of that area. Both Parker and Carter were injured in the attack, but Akira Murray lost her life. So our heart breaks. Everyone in this chamber, I know. Our heart breaks for her family, and our prayers are with Patience Carter and Tiara Parker as they recover. Sadly, the LGBT community isn't alone in experiencing this hate that I spoke of a moment ago. A year ago this Friday marks the one-year anniversary of the massacre at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. At this historically African-American church, the oldest AME church in the South, often referred to as Mother Emmanuel, a racist young man with hate in his heart opened fire and took 9 shots. We all know the very moving speech that the president gave that day or the days after. But he said, one of the things the president said was, we have to recognize the uncomfortable truth of that tragedy. And that truth is staring us in the face today. It still stares us in the face. So I think we must act. When you consider 33,000 killed every year by gun violence, 43,000 hate crimes with a firearm over the course of just 4 years. 43,000 hate crimes over 4 years with a firearm. When you consider those numbers, we have a long way to go. So I asked my colleague from Connecticut, I guess it's a two-part question. Why is it that when these things happen, these horrific events happen, we have some people, and this is part of the debate, some people who seem to, their answer when we say, we need to take action, or will you join us in taking action? The answer is, we just have to enforce existing laws, and that's as far as we can go. We can't do anything more than that. We just have to enforce existing laws. So I'd ask that part of the question. The second part is, if we believe the answer to that question is no, we can do more, what is it we should be doing? And I pose this because I have to only wonder and imagine, really imagine in horror, what if that was our answer? What if that was our answer on September the 12th, 2001, and the days after that? What if we said at the time, you know what, this is a horrific event, what happened on 9/11. 3,000 people were killed. The country was shaken to its core, but terrorism is a difficult problem to solve. We will always be dealing with it. We should just enforce existing laws. No, we didn't do that. We said, no, we're going to stop this from happening. We're going to say that we're going to take action so that planes won't be flying into buildings and killing thousands of people. We're going to take action to stop that. And guess what? People came together in this country from one end of the country to the other, and we solved that problem. Hasn't happened. Now we have had other terrorist attacks. We know that. We know we will continue to fight terrorism. But we solved part of the problem because we came together. We even opened up a new federal government agency, for goodness sake, the Department of Homeland Security, which has made our country safer. We have a long way to go on this issue. But I'm glad we answered that question with a determined effort and with a consensus across this city, this center of government and across the country that no, we're not going to surrender to the terrorists. We're going to take action to stop them from getting on airplanes. Why is it that we're not taking the same approach to gun violence? It is complicated. It is difficult to solve this problem. But why not take a series of actions that in and of themselves will not solve the problem? But we can at least take action. So I asked the senator from Connecticut, why is it that the answer by so many people who serve in Congress is there's not much we can do except enforce the law? And if we can take these actions, which I believe we can, what is it that we can do?
I thank the senator for his question and for his passion and for his ability to articulate how complicated this issue is and the complicated nature of the motivations that led to the shooting in Orlando, which is why Senator's legislation that would elevate the treatment of hate crimes with respect to the prohibitions on gun sales is so critically important here, and I hope that we have time to debate that as well. It is an imperative that we act right now, and it is within our power to change the reality that exists every day on the streets of America and with respect to these mass shootings. What we have is loads and reams of data from state experiences to tell us that when you take these common sense steps, like applying background checks to a broader range of gun sales, you have a dramatic reduction in the number of gun homicides that are committed. You have a dramatic reduction in the number of people that are killed. And so there's no doubt that we have the ability to do something here. And you are right that there is a panoply of measures that we need to consider. We have suggested starting with the two that are the least controversial. Start with the two that have the broad support of the American public. Start with an expansion of background checks to gun shows and internet sales and the inclusion of people on the terrorist watch list of those that are prohibited to buy guns. Those are the two that there's no controversy outside of this body on, so it would be a nice start, and then we can get to working on all of those other measures that will truly end up in substantial change, a change in reality of the people who live with this epidemic every day. So I thank the gentleman for his questions and for his passion on this issue.